I've come to Fort Clinch to learn about its history, so let's go inside and see what we can find. Just about to go into Fort Clinch, just kind of getting a look at the outside. This is quite the fort from the entrance. So now let's go in through the sally port and see what we can find. I'm told that today is Confederate Day at the fort, so this should be interesting. It looks like I've arrived just in time for the morning muster. When the Civil War began at Fort Clinch, there was nobody here. They had not finished the fort yet. There was only a caretaker. So when the Confederate troops arrived, they simply asked for the fort, and he turned the fort over to them. At the entrance to the fort, or the sally port, you have two original buildings that were here before the Civil War. One is the guardhouse, and the other is the stockade. So let's go in the stockade and see what we can see in there. Here we have bunks, and we have cells. And across the room, we have another cell. This is a larger cell.
So this is the guardhouse, and this is where the soldiers who are like the provost or the police of the garrison would sleep and stay. And their job is to if one of the other soldiers acts up, gets in a fight, we apprehend him, throw him in the jailhouse. We perform the guard duties, which means we take position around the fort, guard the fort against attack, warn of impending enemy attack. We, if somebody comes to visit us, we welcome them, make sure they're not carrying anything that they shouldn't be, direct them to the general officers, things like that. So that's what the guard does here at the fort.
All right, I'm going to go up the original gun ramp that was completed before the Civil War to look at the guns on the wall. Now these guns were not there in 1861 when the Confederates took over the fort. They were put in by the Union soldiers later in the war. Now there's a brick wall down from the main gun emplacement. Then you have the big guns on the wall behind it here. When the Confederates took over the fort, this is all they would have, field artillery pieces to stick on the wall. These were useless against ships in the harbor because they could only shoot about a mile, yet the guns on the ships could shoot much further, so they could stand offshore and just pound the fort. Therefore, the Confederates never defended this fort. When threatened by the Navy, they just left. Here is what the fort is defending. That's the channel in from the ocean. Comes by an island and then goes down the St. Mary's River. This gun position right here is not from the Civil War. It's from the Spanish-American War. It was built in 1898. They mounted the gun, but by the time they did, the war was over. These gun positions on the wall control the channel. That's why the fort is here. Now, the reason this fort is so important is that they have a Union naval position here to help with the blockade. And these guns cut off the St. Mary's River so no Confederate blockade runners can come in or out with supplies and goods or leave with products. This is strategic for the United States because they can bring their ships in here and run the blockade against the Confederates, and this port will service a large area of the East Coast from the Keys of Florida all the way up to North Carolina. This is a very important position for the Union Navy. On the wall of this fort, you can see that the outer wall is not very thick, and you can look at the color of the brick and tell what was completed when the Confederates took over the fort and what was completed by the Union Army. Where you see the grayer brick, that was here before the Confederates took over. The red brick was added by the Union Army, and you can look at the entire fort and see examples of this. Now let's go into the outer wall of the fort. They have passageways in several positions that'll do this. From here you can look outside the fort and place guns to fire along the fort wall. Then they have stairs that you can enter and go up.
Willie, you want him?
My word.
Mr. Evans!
Fire! Reload!
Mr. Simmons, I don't know if...
Yeah, we're clear. We got company here. Hey! Fire! My order. Load! Fire!
See right down there?
Fire!
This building was built by the Union Army to be the enlisted barracks. But because they never completed the officers' barracks, some of the rooms were used by the officers. So let's go inside the enlisted barracks and take a look around.
This is a secession cockade. You have the seal of Florida from the time period, and I'm in favor of Florida seceding from the Union. So, as a supporter and a woman, I would show my favor or my support by wearing my secession cockade.
In the corner of the fort, near the original gun ramp, we have several things. We have another passageway back to another corner of the fort. We have another bakery for the fort, or kitchen. Then next to the kitchen, we have two latrines, and we have the magazines for the fort. In here, and we have a powder magazine next to that. Now let's go down the wall a little bit and look at the kitchen the reenactors are in.
It's like under here.
Mm-hmm.
The kettle itself weighs a lot. But when that thing is full, you look, it goes in there pretty good ways. They would build up the coals on the fire and they would shovel them into this and heat this up until these outer walls got warm to the touch. And that meant the interior was warm enough or hot enough to start baking. So when that started, they would put the racks with the baked goods in there. And whatever baked at the highest temperatures went in first.
This building is a good example of a building that was started before the Confederates took over the fort and finished by the Union soldiers afterwards. See the lighter colored bricks were before the Civil War, and the red after the war started. So let's go inside and see what's in here. This is a storeroom with ammunition. And in here is the supply officer, or the quartermaster. And another supply room.
Start going down the steps.
In one corner of the fort, we have the men loading and firing a cannon. This is an original Studebaker wagon produced during the Civil War. Now let's go through the sally port and past the guard that they posted and look at the outside of the fort by the water. And here is Fort Clinch from the beach. This is Fort Clinch from the beach right in front of it. They also have a very nice museum at this fort near the visitor center. So once you pay your admission to go inside, you will get to go through this museum and learn some basic information about the fort and how it was built, and who manned the fort, and the environment in the area during the time. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our visit to Fort Clinch. This is a fascinating fort with an interesting history, even though no battles were fought here. So until next time, see ya.